Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Today we're on Carx and I wanted to make a quick little video just giving some tips on learning to drift with a force feedback steering wheel. Now this is going to be pretty universal for anyone that's learning how to drift on a wheel, no matter what game you're on, whether you're on Forza or Assetto, Carx, it's all going to be pretty universal across the board. So first thing you want to do is select a car. Now for me, learning to drift, I'd recommend running the lowest possible grip because it's going to make the car more predictable and you'll have more time to react to it, so it'll give you a better understanding of what's happening and how you can control it. And it will also make the drifting slower, so in a single corner you're not going as fast, so you actually have more time to balance the car while it's in oversteer, which is a really good and really helpful tool to just get a grip of how to drive the car and make it do what you want it to do. Now, so low grip, steering angle is really good to have. You don't need to have like 70 degrees, anywhere between 50 to 60 degrees is more than enough. You can do it on stock as well. It's just going to be a little bit harder because you need to be careful with how much angle you put on the car, because if you're a little bit too far the car's going to over rotate and you're going to be able to recover. So having more steering lock angle is going to make it easier to learn because you have a bit more to play with and you'll be able to recover the car from if you over angle a little bit easier. Now today I'm just going to be driving the AE86 on the drift upgrade, which has just over 300 horsepower, which is heaps for an AE86. And we are going to run the lowest tyre possible, so remember where it is. So we're running 90 adhesion, and just to apply that, and we are running a stock tune. So one thing I want to stress is you do not need to worry about having a good tune on the car when you're just learning how to drive it. Seat time is going to be your biggest tool. Oops, so if I just reset all real quick, just so you can see it's on the stock tune. All we're changing is the tyre grip. Okay, so we'll apply that. Yeah, so I lost what I was saying there then. We've got a training just on the parking lot course. There's a good section around the back where it's quite open. But first things first, we've got a decent amount of power, we've got a decent amount of steering lock, so the car's going to be fairly easy to drift, and that's what I was saying before. You do not need to rely on a tune to learn how to drift a car well. Just learning how to read the car and the visual cues and the force feedback cues is the most important step in understanding how to drift on a game or sim with the steering wheel. So the first things first, I like to recommend using a view that's fixed to the car. I like using the in-car view because it gives me a good sort of visualization of where the car is and what it's doing. Some people might prefer to use third person, I prefer to use the cockpit view. And for learning purposes, I recommend not running the drift motion camera for one simple reason, is because we can use the horizon shifting as a very useful tool to understand what the car is about to do. So when we're driving in a straight line, you can see the horizon's quite still, it doesn't really move. When we turn a corner, the horizon starts to shift, and it will do the same thing when we're drifting, but when we're drifting, when the car's about to change direction, the horizon will actually stop moving. So it's a very, very good visual cue to get a reference for if the car's going to change direction or not, and help you prepare for it. So if we get into a drift, you see the horizon's moving to the left, and as the car's about to transition, the horizon actually stops moving, even though the car's still sliding sideways, because its trajectory is starting to change. The other thing you need is to understand the force feedback cues. Now, when you're turning a corner, you're going to have a constant force applying in the opposite direction of what you're turning, and it's the same thing when you're drifting. So when you're actually drifting, you're not just letting the wheels just float along and there's no force in the wheel. You're actually still turning the corner. So regardless of where the wheel position is, you're forcing slip angle on the tyre to help it turn around an arc. And it's exactly the same principle as when you turn the car. So as we're turning, we're generating a slip angle on the front tyres, which is trying to force the wheel to turn in this direction. So if I let the wheel go, the car's just going to straighten up because the force is trying to align the car. It's the same thing when you're drifting. So as we get sideways, I catch the wheel, and I'm still holding tension in the wheel because I'm still wanting it to drift around a consistent arc. Now using that force, and that's how you learn to be smooth, you got to read that force and know how much you can turn into it, how much slip angle to apply to make the car rotate more or bring it back in, and it's just how you need to understand the force feedback. And it's how similar to how the steering assist works for controllers, is instead of the thumbstick movement controlling the absolute left and right of the tyre and it always springs to centre, it actually is more realistic, and the steering is actually aligning to the self-aligning force, and moving the stick is actually applying slip angle on the tyre. So that's why in Carx, opposed to Forza, when you're drifting you actually turn into the direction of the drift. It doesn't mean your front wheels are actually turning in, it just means that they're being turned into the slip angle to generate a curve. Even regardless of what the rear end of the car is doing or where the wheel position is, it's always going to be trying to turn it into the corner, and then vice versa. So if you turn correct into the drift by turning to the right, if we're drifting around the left hand arc, it's going to try and make the car change direction because of the based on slip angle basically. I don't want to get too technical, I probably already have for some people, but we're just understanding the force that's being applied through the wheel. So as we drift, like I said, we keep a consistent tension in the wheel to maintain a drift arc. The more force we put, the more the car's going to try and rotate, and if we sort of add more countersteer to release that force, the wheel is going to get very light, and then it's going to suddenly change direction. So that's one of the things you need to learn to read and how to sort of use it to your advantage. Now, when you're in drift, it's not just the steering that's going to affect the angle of the car, it's also the throttle and even the braking and the hand braking. Everything is all combined together. So when you're practicing, you don't want to just try and focus on all of these things all at the same time. You kind of want to just sort of learn and build the muscle memory and sort of adapt and just become more natural and fluent in how you understand what the car is doing. It's a lot to take in, and it does take a bit of practice to learn. I've obviously been sim drifting for a very long time now, so it's quite natural for me. On this game I was linking the full section of this course in the stock AE86 on my second try basically. But yeah, it's very easy to understand when you sort of break it down and just sort of concentrate on different areas. And one thing you really need to do is just put in seat time and just practice, because it's not something, some people might pick it up really quickly, but for other people it will take quite a bit of time to learn. So back to what we were saying, so keeping the tension in the wheel, maintain a consistent arc. You can see the horizon is in a constant rotation because we're constantly moving, and if I get ready to transition, you see the transition happens quite smoothly because I didn't apply more steering lock when the horizon's sort of starting to shift. When it slows down, you know the car's about to change direction. So you can either keep your steering lock where it is, which is going to give you a reasonable transition speed. If you apply more lock, it's going to make it transition faster. Or if you reduce the lock at that point, that's when it's going to slow it down, and you can either straighten the car out or do a really slow transition. So I'll see if I can give you a few examples. So in drift, horizon stop moving. If I apply more lock, the car just whips around almost uncontrollably. So we want to get it back into a drift. And as the horizon stops moving, what I like to do is release the throttle. So the more throttle you have, the quicker the car's going to try and whip around because the rear end is just not gripping up. If you roll out of the throttle at that point, the car's going to sort of grip up as it gets straighter, which is going to prevent it from over-rotating so quickly, and it can give you a really nice transition. So you can make transitions happen quite smoothly just by letting the wheel do the work. So if I give you another example, so just hold that consistent angle, roll out of the throttle, back into it, and the car just, it wants to drive straight. So if the car is over rotating and snapping, there is something not quite right, because the car should always want to try and track straight. It's what a car is designed to do. So even without any input, the car's going to want to try and correct and drive in a straight line. Now we can change the, obviously put manual input and help the car recover quicker or smoother, and that's part of being the driver, that you need to learn how everything sort of works together. The best practice technique is literally just doing donuts. Find a nice obstacle, reasonable size donut space. Learn how the throttle, the steering, how it all comes together, so you can balance the car while it's in oversteer, and understand how to manage it. That's really all there is to it. There's not a lot more than that. I mean, you can dive deep into the tuning, but in my opinion, if you don't understand how to balance the car without, doing like rapid inputs, if you can't drive the car smoothly, then tuning shouldn't be that big of an issue for you yet. The stock tunes are more than capable of drifting extremely smoothly, very casually. If you're drifting and if you're not really feeling what the car is doing, and you're just driving quite erratically, really stabbing the throttle and jerking the steering, I wouldn't be focused too much on tuning. I would be focusing on more learning how to understand the car and what it's doing, so you can smooth out all those inputs. And then once you get to that point where you're feeling smooth, then you can start fine-tuning the car. And basically what the tuning will do is will change how the car will behave at certain angles, and how much you want sort of the balance of oversteer to be done through the steering or through the throttle or through the braking. And it just allows you to sort of fine-tune the areas of which you enjoy driving the car and set it up for yourself, sort of thing. Now everyone is going to be different and will run different tunes, but yeah, that's pretty much it. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.